Thanks everybody for coming out. And Chair Kafori, Commissioner Jayapal, Representatives Prusak and Reynolds, Jennifer, and all her incredible allies with Moms Demand Action, and of course Madeleine and Nicolette's mother. Now, on behalf of Nicolette and so many women shot and killed by domestic abusers, I so wish that today simply wasn't necessary. The horrifying facts are stark. Each year in America, more than 600 women are shot to death by an intimate partner. Honoring their memories demands that laws be changed and the loopholes be slammed shut so that women are not at the mercy of violent spouses and partners who get a gun. In short, thoughts and prayers simply aren't going to cut it. The Senate legislation I introduced last week takes its name from Nicolette, a Connecticut woman, also fatally shot by her abuser, and it involves 3 common sense steps. First, the legislation would close a loophole that lets domestic violence abusers possess or buy firearms when a temporary or emergency restraining order has been issued against them. Second, the legislation closes the so-called boyfriend loophole, so protections extend to prevent domestic violence dating partners from possessing or accessing firearms. That would protect domestic violence survivors. I'm going to invite our guests to make their comments. I have always believed in the right of law-abiding citizens to own guns. Domestic abusers are not law-abiding citizens. And they are cruel criminals who the United States Senate ought to agree should not have guns. I'll let Nicolette's mom cover her daughter's story. But I'll tell you, if my legislation had been in place in 2014, Nicolette might still be alive and raising her 2 daughters today. The devastating loss for Nicolette's loved ones is one that families just should not have to endure in our country. Common sense steps like keeping guns out of the hands of domestic violence abusers certainly can help reduce the chance of repeat gun tragedies. So now I'm going to turn it over to a mom who's demanding action. This mom is also the chair of Multnomah County, and this mom is also my neighbor in southeast Portland. Chair Deborah Kafori, and then I'll just call up our other guests and we'll take your questions. Chair Kafori.
Thank you, Senator Wyden. As the Senator said, my name is Deborah Kafori, and I'm your Multnomah County Chair. Pleased to join so many others in support of and gratitude for Senator Wyden's introduction of the Lori Jackson Nicolette Elias Domestic Violence Survivor Protection Act. We know that domestic violence takes root at the intersection of many of our community's most pressing issues, among them the lack of access to affordable housing, the scarcity of opportunities to become financially independent, fraying, chronically underfunded social safety nets, and a criminal legal system that is often daunting, if not outright hostile to survivors. All inequities and shortcomings are echoed across our entire country. To compound the risk that survivors face, the COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted nearly every aspect of our lives, creating unimaginably stressful conditions for far. Year and a half, we've heard from advocates. These stresses, combined with dwindling privacy within the home and increased isolation, especially from their usual support systems, was a recipe for making dangerous situations. And tragically, we've seen that play out in increased frequency and severity of domestic violence, including more instances of gun-related domestic violence homicides. Locally, Multnomah County, we're responding to this urgent crisis by increasing funding for interventions that will result in more support for survivors and a strengthened domestic violence response system. We've increased the number of violence crisis response unit so that it's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That way we can respond quickly during late night and early morning hours when many of the most complex domestic violence calls occur. This additional capacity is crucial to take advantage of a small window of time when survivors are more likely to engage in the advocacy and services that we offer. We're also using our American Rescue Plan funds to increase safety, and I want to give thanks to and gratitude to Senator Wyden and to the Oregon delegation for ensuring that we received these crucial funds. With these stimulus funds, the county is adding culturally specific case management services to offer more tailored supports to survivors of color. We're also investing resources to make sure that in cases of high lethality domestic violence, we have victims advocates available to provide long-term case management and advocacy. Created a backlog of domestic violence cases in the district attorney's office, so we're using our rescue plan dollars to ensure sufficient staffing to work with these cases. Along with have introduced the Lori Jackson Nicolette Elias Domestic Violence Survivor Protection Act, closing the loophole that allow abusers to purchase firearms are as critical as they are acts of common sense.
Thank you, Chair Kafori. And good government runs in the Jayapal family, and it's a real pleasure to introduce Commissioner Jayapal this morning.
Thank you, Senator Wyden. Good morning. The data on the deadly link between guns and domestic and intimate partner violence has long been clear. It's irrefutable that women are dying because of our collective failure to take guns out of the equation. It's also irrefutable that the time period that the Lori Jackson Domestic Violence Survivor Protection Act addresses is the most dangerous time of all for victims. The time after a woman has decided to go to the courts for help and get a temporary restraining order. This is the time when an abuser is most likely to reach for his firearm. Hundreds of these women pass through these doors, the doors of the Gateway Center for Domestic Violence, every year, seeking temporary restraining orders. They do so in spite of the risk they know they face, because they feel they've exhausted every other alternative available to them. When they do that, when they take that step, we must protect them by making sure that their abusers don't have access to firearms. This bill is a crucial step in that direction. As the chair of the Gateway Center Advisory Council and of Multnomah County's Domestic Violence Fatality Review Team, I want to thank Senator Wyden, not just for this bill, certainly for this bill, but for his decades of work on behalf of victims and survivors of domestic and sexual violence. That support was critical to creating this place where we're gathering today, the Gateway Center, which now, more than 10 years into its existence, is the cornerstone of Multnomah County's continuum of care for victims and survivors. I also want to thank all of the frontline providers. As the chair mentioned, the work they've done over the past year and 3 months has been heroic. The social isolation and economic and social stressors created by the pandemic have led to skyrocketing increases in domestic violence. During the last 6 months of 2020, domestic violence calls to 911 almost quadrupled over the same period in 2019. County staff and providers had to figure out how to meet that need while being unable to meet with survivors in person and while experiencing the pandemic themselves. Through it all, our frontline service providers have continued to provide safety and support for survivors, and we are very grateful. Last, but certainly not least, I want to thank all of the survivors and advocates, including the folks behind me, Moms Demand Action, whose years of tireless work have brought us to this point. The Lori Jackson Domestic Violence Survivor Protection Act reflects the continued evolution of our understanding of the deadly risks faced by victims of domestic violence. As much as that understanding, there's still a great deal more to be done. Domestic violence is still too often viewed as a somewhat ancillary issue, rather than as the profound public health issue that it is, one that intersects with all of our most complex social problems, including racial justice, houselessness, and the need to rethink our criminal legal system. As we continue to address domestic violence as a public health issue, we must tackle all of the factors that trap women in cycles of domestic and intimate partner violence, including poverty and systemic racism, and provide the resources they need in order to escape that cycle and to create safety for themselves and their families. We must continue to listen to survivors like those we're going to hear from this morning, who've led the fight to close this loophole, and we must provide the responses they're asking for. Increasingly, they're asking not only for law enforcement responses that reflect the urgency and lethality of this form of violence, but also for non-law enforcement responses as well, when turning to the police or the courts is not the safest or most effective alternative for them. This is the work we're engaging in at the Gateway Center and throughout Multnomah County's continuum of care. The work of elevating survivor voice and collaborating across systems to better align our efforts around violence prevention and intervention, centering values of equity, accountability, collaboration, and evidence-based practice. I so appreciate Senator Wyden's partnership in this work, and I'm looking forward to the continued collaboration among our county, state, and federal systems in moving it forward. Thank you.
Commissioner, thank you. And when I talked to Nicolette's mom, Madeleine Garcelon, I think Nicolette's youngsters were there.
Yes, they were.
And Madeleine described the kind of searing pain that the family was still dealing with. And I just remember putting the phone down, and I said, so, Ron, your job is to make sure that as many people as possible understand what happened, what the family is going through. And Ms. Garcelon, we're just very honored that you would be here today, because we want Oregon to understand that this isn't about facts and statistics. This is just fair. It's fair in our state. So we're honored to have you.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Madeleine Garcelon, and I am Nicolette Elias's mother. 6.5 years ago, our whole world was shattered. My beloved daughter was brutally murdered in a domestic violence situation. She was shot 7 times by her abusive ex-husband while her 7 and 8-year-old daughters were there. This should have, and it could have been prevented. Nicolette had a stalking order and a restraining order. I sat in the courtroom as Nicolette told the judge he was dangerous and that she was afraid. This act of domestic violence has taken its toll on her whole family. Nicolette's daughters have suffered nightmares, depression, and detachment disorder. They've had years of counseling and even medication. My other daughter, Sonia, lost her only sibling, her confidant, her secret keeper, her best friend. We have all cried an ocean of tears. This murder was premeditated, violent, and bloody. One of the horrors of this whole thing is that there's no do-overs. Once it's done, it's done. No matter how much you cry, pray, or wish, there's nothing, absolutely nothing, that can change it. That's why this Lori Jackson Nicolette Elias Domestic Violence Survivor Protection Act is so important. Thanks to Senator Wyden and Senator Blumenthal, this bill will no doubt keep other kids, siblings, and parents from going through the never-ending grief that we are going through. This is an opportunity. This is a chance to do better. This is our chance to do right by women and men who are going in a domestic violence situation. I can't thank Senator Wyden enough for stepping up and to help this from ever happening again. Unfortunately, my story is not unique. Thank you.
And Ms. Garcelon, all of us as elected officials struggle for words to really describe how painful this is for families. I really got a sense that night what it meant to you all. And I think the fact that you're willing to come and describe to the people of Oregon, more than 4 million of us collectively, what this means is going to really help.
Thank you.
We're very
I think what you're doing, and Senator Blumenthal, hopefully will help other people from going through this grief. I am the face of all these statistics. It's not just another thing that goes away. It's forever. It's with me. It's with my granddaughters. It's with my other daughter. It's never ending. Thank you.
When I go to the floor of the United States Senate, I'm going to think about your daughter. I'm going to think about you. I'm going to think about those little ones
Thank you.
that understandably were so upset that night you talked.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Jennifer Langston. She's going to represent Moms Demand Action. Some of you know that I've had close to 1,000 town hall meetings. Looking forward to being able to do those in person again. And nothing is better than seeing Moms Demand Action in the crowd, because these are folks, I would say, the press, who understand the political change is grassroots up, not government buildings down. Please.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for showing up today to help break the cycle of domestic violence and to interrupt intimate partner gun violence. And thank you to Senator Wyden for your leadership. My name is Jennifer Langston. I'm a volunteer with the Oregon chapter of Moms Demand Action. I and other volunteers with Moms Demand Action work to elevate the voices of gun violence survivors, to help enact common sense laws to save lives. I do not stand here alone. Every day I hear the stories of countless mothers, fathers, siblings, family members, and friends impacted and traumatized by the loss of a loved one to a firearm in a domestic abuse situation. My own family received the phone call on the morning of April 1st, 2014, a call to tell them to make arrangements for my funeral. Because someone I love and trusted decided they couldn't have me, no one else would. In the early hours of April Fool's Day, threats became my reality. After days of being held hostage and threatened with a gun, out of desperation I uttered, "I think we should break up." The most dangerous time of domestic violence is when the person tries to leave, and adding a firearm to the dispute makes it more dangerous. Research shows that women are 5 times more likely to be killed when a firearm is present in a domestic dispute. Once I voted to exit the relationship, the man I love and trusted aimed and fired at my heart. I was able to turn and told me to run for my life. I never thought to get a restraining order. My abuser told me it was his word against mine, and that the restraining order was only a piece of paper that had no action until abuser attempted. But Senator Wyden's bill will give that piece of paper to prevent and protect women and children or attempt to. My story is not unique. My story is thousands of families in and around the U.S. sense of what they could have done to save. Firearms and require gun owners to securely store firearms when not in use. The introduction of Nicolette's Law only furthers this progress to reduce gun violence. Nicolette's Law will help save the lives of those trying to escape the domestic violence cycle. I want to thank you all again for listening and helping to bring awareness to domestic violence in our country.
Ms. Langston, thank you very much, and all of the moms demand action. Keep on coming on, and I look forward to seeing you at the town hall meetings when we start again in person. And now, the big issues always involve the federal government working closely with the state, so we're really fortunate to have state.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rachel Prusak, State Representative for House District 37, and here to share a story. When I was 16, a high school football player turned his attention to me, and we began dating. Within a few months, the attention evolved into controlling and violent behavior. His temper grew short, violent threats peaked, and he became increasingly aggressive. Thankfully, my parents helped me secure a restraining order. But that didn't stop him from coming to my house, armed with a gun that he flashed at me, demanding that I walk with him so we could talk things out. He pointed the gun at my side as we walked. Fortunately, I was able to placate him, and he let me go. He was arrested for violating the restraining order multiple times, but again, that did not stop him from continuing to stalk me. Even with the restraining order, my life was at constant risk. He was armed and dangerous, and there was nothing more I could do. It wasn't until later I learned he had died that I experienced an indescribable relief, knowing that my parents and I would be safe. At the time, Oregon closed the boyfriend loophole protecting domestic abuse survivors from gun violence. I was not yet a state representative. I was a Moms Demand Action volunteer. I knew what it was to have a boyfriend with gun access stalk me, so I went to Salem to advocate in support of House Bill 4145, putting me on a path to running for office to pass sensible gun legislation and other important public health policies. Saving lives from gun violence is still my mission, and no human being should ever have to experience the fear and pain that I and the suffered at the hands of someone who's supposed to love them. I survived, but I'm here to give voice for the 1 in 3 American women who will be impacted by domestic violence, and for those who are 5 times more likely to die because their abuser has a gun. We must protect other people from a traumatic, potentially deadly experience. Closing the intimate partner loophole in Oregon saved lives. It must be done on a federal level. I commend Senator Wyden for bringing this legislation forward at the federal level, and I'm grateful for Madeline's mom for her bravery. This is a critical step in curbing gun violence nationwide. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative.